Welcome to Pro Billionaires, the channel that brings you the most inspiring stories of transformation. Here, we share the journeys of individuals who started with absolutely nothing and, through hard work, determination, and the right mindset, rose to become self-made millionaires. Our content is all about showcasing how anyone, regardless of their circumstances, can break free from limitations and achieve greatness. Each story is packed with valuable lessons on overcoming obstacles, finding opportunities, and mastering the mindset needed to grow in life and business. These stories will inspire you, motivate you, and teach you essential strategies to succeed in your own journey toward financial independence and personal growth. If you're ready to learn, grow, and take the next step toward your own success, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Stay connected and get ready for your own transformation. He was born in the narrowest alley of a forgotten town where the houses were made of rusted sheet metal and wood scavenged from construction sites, where children played barefoot among broken glass, and where dreams were things people talked about when they were too tired to work and too hopeless to cry. His name was Elijah, and from the moment he could walk he learned what hunger felt like, not the kind that comes before lunch but the kind that gnaws at your bones for days. His father left when he was 3, chasing after a promise of money in another city, but he never came back, and Elijah's mother worked from sunrise to midnight scrubbing floors and washing clothes for families who would never remember her name. He watched her hands crack and bleed from harsh soaps and cold water and wondered if this was all life had to offer. By the time he was 8, Elijah was helping his mother carry water from the community tap miles away and sell scraps at the local junkyard for a few coins. He wore the same pair of torn shorts for 3 years, and his shoes were 2 sizes too small, but he never complained because everyone around him had it just as bad or worse. What made Elijah different, though, was the way he looked at things. He asked questions no one else did, like why they had to live like this and why some people had everything while others had nothing. His mother would smile sadly and say, "Some are born lucky, baby, but maybe you'll be the one who changes that," and he held on to those words like a lifeline. At school, Elijah stood out not because of his clothes or his smell but because of the way he listened. He soaked up every word, every lesson, every book like they were treasures, and his teachers noticed. He started staying after class to help clean just so he could get extra time with the schoolbooks, and he read them again and again until the pages tore. When he turned 13, everything changed. A fire tore through the neighborhood one night, taking with it their tiny shack and everything they owned. They slept in a public restroom for weeks until someone from a local shelter found them a spot, but even their life was a struggle. Elijah's mother got sick and couldn't work anymore, and the burden of survival fell entirely on his young shoulders. He took whatever jobs he could, sweeping stalls, carrying bricks, washing cars, and some days he made just enough to buy his mother her medicine and a piece of bread for them to share. Still, he never gave up on school, never stopped reading and learning. He started sneaking into the local internet cafe at night when the attendant fell asleep and taught himself how to type, how to use a computer, how to code from free websites and borrow time. It was in that dingy cafe at 2 in the morning when he stumbled across a forum where people talked about making money online. He read stories of freelancers, digital nomads, people who built businesses from nothing, and suddenly the world didn't seem so small anymore. Elijah saw possibility for the first time, and it lit a fire in him stronger than hunger or fear. He decided he would teach himself everything he needed to know about building websites so he could start freelancing. He borrowed an old laptop from a neighbor who owed his mother a favor, and every night he practiced using free tutorials. His fingers were slow at first and his code was messy, but he kept going until the errors became successes and the design started looking real. By 16, he landed his first gig designing a basic website for a small clothing vendor who paid him just enough to feel real, enough to make him believe he could do it again and again, and he did. Within months he had more clients coming in from word of mouth than he could handle alone, and he started teaching other kids at the shelter what he knew, hiring the best ones to help with projects. Word spread quickly. A kid from the slums who made websites better than most agencies. People started talking, asking who this boy was and how he learned everything from scratch. Clients began to trust him with bigger jobs, more complicated platforms, and with each success Elijah grew more confident, more skilled, and more determined to never go back to where he started. But just when things seemed to be looking up, fate threw him another challenge, and it was the kind that would have broken anyone else. Elijah was no stranger to hardship, but the sudden betrayal by someone he had trusted felt like a punch in the stomach that knocked the wind out of him. The business he had worked tirelessly to build was on the brink of crumbling, and the person responsible for the wreckage was a mentor, a man who had guided him through the early days of his freelance journey. His name was Richard, a successful entrepreneur who had taken an interest in Elijah's potential and offered him mentorship when Elijah was still struggling to get by. Richard had promised to help him scale his business, to teach him how to handle bigger clients and take on larger projects with more confidence. But what Elijah didn't know was that Richard had ulterior motives. One day, Richard asked Elijah to partner up on a major project with a company that could propel them both into the spotlight. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, or so it seemed. Elijah, eager to prove himself, agreed without hesitation. They spent weeks preparing proposals, designing the platform, and fine-tuning every detail. They were ready to present it to the company's CEO, a well-known figure in the tech industry, and everything was lined up for success. But when the day of the pitch arrived, something went horribly wrong. Instead of presenting their work as a team, Richard presented the project as his own. He took all the credit, leaving Elijah in the shadows and cutting him out of the deal entirely. The company signed with Richard alone, and Elijah was left standing in the cold. It felt like a betrayal of the worst kind. The pain of it cut deeper than any physical wound could, because it wasn't just the money or the opportunity that hurt. It was the realization that someone he had trusted had seen him as nothing more than a stepping stone, someone to use and discard once they had no more use for him. For weeks, Elijah could hardly bring himself to open his laptop, to look at the projects he had once been so passionate about. But then something inside him snapped. He had worked too hard, had come too far, to let this setback destroy everything he had built. He couldn't let Richard win, not like this. With renewed determination, Elijah pushed forward. He learned from his mistakes. He knew now that he couldn't trust anyone completely and that every success would be fought for by his own hands and no one else's. He redoubled his efforts, reaching out to old clients and offering even better services than before. He promised himself that he would never rely on anyone again to shape his future. He would create his own destiny. One night, while working late on a website redesign for a client, Elijah received an unexpected email. It was from a venture capital firm that had seen his work online and wanted to meet with him. They had been watching his progress for months and believed in his potential. They were willing to invest in him and his ideas. The offer was too good to pass up. Elijah knew this was his chance to prove to the world, and to himself, that he was capable of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. The company was offering him not just money, but a partnership, a chance to scale his business beyond the confines of his small room and make an impact in the tech industry. Elijah spent the next several weeks preparing for the pitch. He knew this was his moment to finally break free from the past and take control of his future. He refined his business model, pitched his ideas, and shared his vision for a tech startup that could change the way small businesses approached their online presence. When the day came, he stepped into the meeting room with a sense of calm determination. He didn't need anyone to validate his worth anymore. He had already proven to himself that he was capable of succeeding on his own terms. As he presented his plan, the investors listened intently, nodding in approval at his ideas and his passion for the project. By the end of the meeting, the deal was made. Elijah had secured the funding and the support he needed to turn his business into something much greater than he had ever dreamed possible. But even with the newfound success, Elijah knew that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. He wasn't naive enough to think that everything would be easy now. There would always be people like Richard trying to take advantage of others, and there would be setbacks and challenges that could derail everything he had worked for. But Elijah had learned the hard way that failure wasn't something to be feared, it was something to be embraced, because each failure brought him one step closer to success. He had risen from the depths of poverty and had fought his way to the top. He had seen what it was like to have nothing, and now he would fight with everything he had to keep what he had earned. As he looked out of the window of his new office, watching the city lights twinkle below him, Elijah couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey he had taken. It wasn't the success that mattered the most, it was the resilience, the ability to rise every time life knocked him down, that defined who he had become. As the years went by, Elijah's business continued to grow rapidly and his name became known in the tech industry. He was no longer the young boy from the alleyways who struggled just to survive. He had built a thriving empire from nothing, a company that now employed hundreds of people across multiple countries and offered cutting-edge services to clients around the world. But success had brought with it a new set of challenges, one that Elijah had never imagined. As his company expanded, so did the pressure to maintain his position at the top. There were competitors who saw his rapid rise as a threat and would stop at nothing to undermine his success. They launched smear campaigns, spread false rumors, and tried to sabotage his projects in every way imaginable. But Elijah was no stranger to adversity, and he refused to let their efforts shake his resolve. One night he sat alone in his office, staring at the glowing screen of his computer as a flood of emails and messages poured in from angry clients accusing his company of failing to deliver on their promises. It wasn't the first time he had faced a crisis, but this felt different. The weight of his responsibility now extended beyond just his business. It was the lives of his employees, their families, the communities that depended on his success. He knew he couldn't face this challenge alone, but trust had always been an issue for him. After all the betrayals he had suffered, it was difficult for him to let anyone in completely. He had learned the hard way that not everyone had his best interests at heart. But at that moment Elijah realized something crucial. He could either let fear and doubt control him, or he could rise above it and do what he had always done best. He gathered his team of trusted employees, the ones who had stood by him through thick and thin, and together they devised a plan to address the crisis. They worked tirelessly to resolve the issues that had arisen. They communicated openly with clients, offering apologies and solutions, and they delivered results that exceeded expectations. By the time the dust settled, the crisis was over, and Elijah had not only weathered the storm but had come out stronger than ever. His company was now more respected than it had ever been. He had proven to the world that no matter what obstacles stood in his way, he was unstoppable. But Elijah knew that this victory wasn't the end of the journey. It was simply another chapter in the ongoing story of his life. Success was never permanent and wealth was never guaranteed. The moment he became complacent would be the moment he started to lose everything. One day, as he sat in a meeting with some of his top executives discussing the future of the company, Elijah received a call that would change his life forever. It was a phone call that every entrepreneur dreams of but never expects to receive. The call came from an investment firm, a massive one that wanted to buy his company for billions of dollars. They had been watching his company's growth and saw the potential for even greater success. With their backing, the offer was tempting beyond belief. It was enough money to change his life forever, to secure the futures of his family and loved ones, and to give him the kind of wealth that most people could only dream of. But as he sat there listening to the details of the offer, Elijah felt an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. He had worked so hard for this, he had sacrificed so much, he had fought against the odds every step of the way, and now someone wanted to buy everything he had built. Would he be giving up his dream, his legacy, for a few $1 billion, or could he use this opportunity to take his company to even greater heights? It wasn't an easy decision, but after much contemplation Elijah turned down the offer. He realized that his true wealth was not just in the money he had accumulated, but in the impact he had made on the world and the lives he had touched along the way. He wasn't done yet. There was still more to accomplish and more people to help. In the years that followed, Elijah continued to lead his company to new heights. He expanded into new markets and ventured into philanthropic work, using his wealth and influence to help children in underprivileged communities access education and technology. He became a mentor to countless young entrepreneurs, inspiring them to chase their dreams and overcome the obstacles in their path. As he stood at the helm of his company looking out at the horizon, Elijah knew that the journey he had started so many years ago was far from over. He had come a long way from the alleyways of his childhood, but the fire inside him still burned brighter than ever. Elijah had transformed his life in ways that no one could have imagined, not even himself. But it wasn't just about the riches he had earned or the success he had achieved. It was about the person he had become and the legacy he would leave behind. He had shown the world that no matter where you start, no matter how impossible your dreams may seem, with enough determination, resilience, and hard work, anything is possible. And that was the most shocking part of his success story, because if Elijah could do it, anyone could.